Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm going to be bringing you an Ableton Live 10 tutorial today. It's going to be on sound design and specifically combining FM and sine compression to make a wonky bass sound. Alright, so first things first, I want to show you what it sounds like once we're done making it. And soloed. Alright, so yeah, that's the patch we're going to be making. So I'm just going to go ahead and open a new live set. And we're going to start by smashing a sine wave. I basically look at it like sculpting. So we're going to take a sine wave and we're going to try to get as many harmonics out of it as we can. Or maybe not as many, but a good amount, and ones that are pleasant. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a MIDI track, and we're going to drop in an operator, and we just want a sine wave. We do want an F0 though, so I'm going to create oh, and my shortcuts should be popping up on the screen, so if you're wondering how something happened, it should just tell you what I pushed on the keyboard to get it to pop up. We're looking for F0. Why can't I scroll? What is happening? Alright. We're just gonna make this the whole thing. And this is just so we have this toggled so that it loops. And we're just looping this bar right here, or whatever. And I will put a pitch envelope on this. Doesn't really matter, but sometimes it can create some interesting stuff in the beginning. So that's what we got right now. Actually, I'm going to toss in an oscilloscope and a spectrum. And these aren't vital, so don't worry. I know this isn't stock Ableton. I promise stock Ableton. But this is just so you can see what I'm doing. You don't really need to do this when you create it. So this is just going to show us our waveform. There's our sine wave, and you can see it there in the spectrum as well. Get the peak there on F0. Alright, so I'm going to close this. The first thing we're going to do is, as far as distorting it, is we're going to drop in pedal. It's a new effect that comes with Ableton Live 10. I really love this thing. Honestly, I love the fuzz the most, but we're going to be using distort today. And I'll go ahead and show you what this is going to do. So even just on distort with everything turned down, now our wave is kind of getting squared off a little bit. We are going to crank the gain. I almost forgot to put a limiter in here. So now we've got this sort of square saw combo thing going on here. You can see we've added all these harmonics. So basically what this first step is, we're just going to try to make this top end as rich as possible. So it's like a block of sound, and then we'll sculpt away at it. We'll play with these settings a little bit, see if we can get more harmonics out of it. Alright, so yeah, I like how that sounds. I mean, obviously it doesn't sound great yet, but we're getting there. You can see the wave has been really flattened out though. So we're going to grab a saturator, and we're going to saturate it. Cool. I'm not going to play around with the color at all, because as soon as you start messing with the bass, it makes it flat again. So we're just going to leave that. Alright, so we got a pretty good block of sound there now. Alright, so now we want the audio from this. So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate with Command D, or Control D, and we're going to freeze. Then we're going to flatten. And a very important step that I always forget is you've got to mute this. You got to disarm this, otherwise you're listening to both. And for some reason, I think it's just because it's so loud, and I also have a limiter on the master. It's it doesn't sound that different. It's just enough to mess you up, but not enough for you to notice. So just make sure that this is the only track you have armed. Now we're going to kind of shape it. We want to get some movement from it, and by that I kind of mean like highlighting certain harmonics. And here, I'll show you. So I'm going to grab the limiter, the spectrum, and the oscilloscope and drop them in here. Alright, so we're going to grab a phaser. This is a nice, easy way to get some movement. We're going to drag the poles down to 1. Make sure dry wet's all the way up, and turn the phase all the way down, amount all the way up. And then we're going to take this node here and put it all the way up in feedback and around 2000 kilohertz, or well, 2000 hertz, or 2 kilohertz. And this is going to give us some movement in the top end harmonics and leave the sub pretty much untouched. You can see that movement there. I'll show you in the oscilloscope too. So yeah, now we've got a little bit of movement there. It's still mono though. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get some stereo width. So we're going to drop in an auto filter. This is kind of to taste, but I'm going to put it here, put the amount up all the way, and we're going to bring it to like 30 something. I don't know, 32 hertz, or 0.32 hertz. So now we've got this. Actually, yeah, that should be fine. It's gonna mess with the sub a little bit, but I think it'll be okay once we're done. We're not really going to be just using this whole block of sound. We're going to be putting it in a sampler. So, all right, we're going to click on this and then hit Control G to group it. And then click on this little button here. It'll open up the different, what are they called, chains. And if you just duplicate this chain and then go over here, and on your second chain, just invert this filter to a band reject, and then turn the resonance all the way down. This is going to give you kind of like a nice little sweeping filter, and it's going to let us put effects specifically on this band of frequencies. So this is where we're going to get our stereo width. We're going to put a chorus just on this. I've seen a lot of people do this, and it's a cool way to get some like neuro-y movement to your basses. I turn delay off, or delay 2 off. I'm going to set this to like 140, just in case. It doesn't really matter. Dry wet all the way up. Negative polarity. This is all kind of to taste, but we'll listen to what it sounds like now. So you can kind of hear that sort of neuro-y sound coming through now. We definitely have some stereo width. So I'm going to double click on the name here to collapse it. And we're just going to do one more instance of that. Because what happens is like you have a moment where it's stereo, or more pronounced stereo, and then you have times when it's not as stereo. So we're just going to put this one in a different place, put the amount up, make sure it's at a different rate, otherwise it'll just end up exaggerating whatever you did here. Again, we're going to group it, we're going to duplicate the chain, and we're going to invert the filter, resonance down. And now I'm going to use kind of a cheap trick I learned a long time ago, which is take a simple delay, put both these on time, put this dry wet knob all the way up, and then we're going to bring this time all the way down, and then this one we're going to put to like 20 to 30 milliseconds. And it's just creating a delay from your left and right ear, which for some reason gives the illusion of stereo, even though it's the same signal. I actually think it's kind of similar to what a chorus does. But yeah, I don't like doing this on like a whole sound, but just doing it on this little band of sound and still having the rest of the sound be kind of not phasing or whatever this is doing to it ends up being okay. Alright, so we can listen to it now. So we definitely got some good movement there. And now we're just going to do what we did last time again. We're going to duplicate this whole track. We're going to freeze it. And we're going to flatten it. You can also resample if you know how to do that. This is faster, so that's the way I do it. I mean, I do it both ways. I forget sometimes, but also sometimes I feel like when you record something, it comes out differently, but I'm not entirely sure if it's supposed to or not, so we're going to zoom in. Oops. So OCD, just get rid of these tails. Make sure to mute this again. Make sure that you're only listening to the newest one. And now you can see we've got some differences between the two, like the left and the right channels. We've definitely got some stereo width going, but I just want my block of sound back. So I'm going to, again, copy these for you. It might just be the limiter and the spectrum. And we are going to grab a saturator. And we're just going to do some soft saturation. If we look at the Sine Wave right now, I was trying to get it so it was stuck on the thing so I could give you an example, but at certain points in time the wave isn't really maxed out. So I just want to do some soft saturation and get it so that it's really pushed to the limit. And we want to make sure it's got a consistent amount of volume, and so we're going to push it up against the limiter a little bit. Cool. So we'll duplicate this one last time. Freeze. Flatten. And now you'll see we've got that block back. It's still going to have stereo width to it. But there aren't huge dips in the volume. It's more of a consistent block of sound. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and drop in a MIDI track. Go to Instruments and drop in Sampler. So Sampler is where it's going to start to get cool. We're going to take this last one that we made, actually mute it, and then drag it and put it in our sampler. So now it's basically an instrument. And this alone is pretty fun. If you got a cool sound, you can just drop it in here and play with it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a pitch envelope. So we're going to go to, we were in sample, we're going to go to the pitch/oscillator tab. We're going to turn on pitch envelope, drag the amount all the way up to +48, and we're going to play with the decay until it's somewhere we like it. I think it's got a nice attack to it. And then we're going to turn on oscillator. And this is where the FN comes in. So this whole process that we did up here was sine compression. We took a sine wave and we distorted it and saturated and squished it and then filtered it and then squished it some more. this is where the FM comes in. So you can see it says FM right here. And we're going to be doing FM with a sine wave. There's a bunch of different waves in here you can choose from. I've had good luck with the saw and the sine. Square kind of breaks things, and all the other ones are, in between. But sine's pretty cool. I'm going to set the course to 2. We're going to play around with that more later, but for now we'll just leave it at 2. And now if we turn this volume up, you'll hear the effect that we're looking for. Cool. So now we got this like squelchy FM thing going. Play around with the sample a little bit. I forgot to bring these over. So you can see, if we turn this off, and if we turn it on, right here we've got some, oops, that's not what I meant to do. We've got some very distinct harmonics right here that we've created with the Sine FM. Alright, so that's kind of cool, but it's a little out of hand. We're getting like a chirp in the beginning. That's because we haven't set the attack yet on this FM. So this attack, decay, release, sustain setup controls just the oscillator that we're modulating our sample with. So we're going to bring this back, and if you bring it back all the way, you can hear that now there's no FM. And then if we bring it in, it just sweeps in. So we're going to set this kind of like just so we're avoiding this this pitch envelope, because if we have this high pitch harmonic being affected by this pitch envelope, it actually ends up like sweeping in from super high and creates kind of an unwanted chirpy noise. We'll just leave the decay up. We want the FM to just keep going. I mean, we can play with that more later, but alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the filter / global tab. We'll bring the volume up. Let's see, like -3. That's really loud. Alright. -9 is a winner. Alright, so I'm going to do this stuff first. So this is just the volume, attack, decay, and release of the whole patch. So if we turn the sustain down, now we'll have this. And so now we're going to play with these parameters and get kind of a nice little pluck or womp or whatever you want to call it. Also very important is to make sure you set your voices to 1. Don't really want to play chords with this, so this way if you play another note, it'll just release the last note and move on. Cool. Now we're going to grab the filter. We're going to put it like halfway. Make sure this note is all the way down. And then, I mean, you can play with the resonance, but for now we'll just leave down. And we got to put this amount right here all the way up so that this is working. And then we control this filter with these parameters here. So we're going to start with the attack. I'm going to play around with this some more too. I'm just playing with these attacks to try to get them lined up in a way that I like. It's kind of to taste, but feel free to copy my parameters once I figure out where I want them. I'm going to turn this up a little bit. There we go. So now we're starting to come into the sound we're looking for there. And we're just going to do a little bit more tweaking after this. So we'll put in an EQ. Actually, we'll play around with saturation a little bit, see if Saturator does anything. Besides, make it louder. So a little bit, it doesn't hurt. Cool. And then we'll EQ it. I've got this set to mid-side. It just helps you separate the... you can EQ the stuff that's mono and the stuff that's stereo separately. And so we don't want anything stereo in the sub bass, otherwise we can get phasing issues and stuff. So we're gonna EQ the mono stuff first. So we're gonna kind of, the sub is actually at a pretty good level right now. So I'm gonna leave that, and then kind of tame these mid frequencies a little bit. Also, you can see there's an outline here. If you want to reset that, you just start and stop the song real quick with spacebar. It gets rid of it. I'm sure there's a different way to do that. It's just what I'm used to. It's like habit. So we're just playing around with this, trying to shape it a little bit. Kind of mimic that shape with this one. So now we're doing the everything that's side, which is anything that's stereo. You can hear if we cut everything out, it's mono. And again, the reason you don't want any of that down near the sub is because you'll get phasing issues sometimes. If you try to have stuff that's stereo, and it'll just mess with your sub. It'll change the volume of it. Sometimes it'll be loud and out of control, and sometimes it'll be gone. So yeah, you just want to make sure you don't let anything go down there. All right, I like that. Cool. So now what we're gonna do is, oh, I forgot I had that. That was a mistake, but it worked out all right. I only meant to do that the one time, but I kept copying them, so I had a +3 in the gain for all my limiters, but it's all good. So I just set that back to 0. We're gonna click on that. We're gonna scroll over, and we're gonna hold Shift, click on the limiter, and then Control G to group all those things. And this is just gonna make it into an instrument rack. And we can go ahead and double click on the names of these and collapse them. Now we're going to click on this little button here. It's going to bring up the macros. We're going to map some macros. Just make this thing a little bit more user-friendly and prettier. Oh, I almost forgot. We're going to grab a tuner here, and we're going to drop a tuner at the end. Sometimes FM makes stuff sound out of tune. So, I mean, a lot of times it doesn't matter because it's just like crazy bass sound design, but for this sound, I like it to be in key. So that's pretty good. That's close enough, and I'll show you an example of like it being out of tune. See, it's like very sharp here, and it's not really going towards the center. You can hear it too. It sounds like dissonant. Got pretty lucky there. We can just leave it on 0. But if it was off, you could play with this fine knob, and you can get it. You can nudge it back in. So the first macro I want to do is the filter frequency cutoff. So we're going to map this right here, and if you push this up and down, you'll see what it does. To macro 1, I'm going to rename it cutoff. And now we can play around with that. It's a good knob to have. Just give it a color. For macro 2, I'm going to go to the pitch oscillation tab, and I'm going to automate this volume right here. Or not automate, but map it to the macro 2. I'm going to rename this FM amount, because turning this up and down turns the FM off or makes it all FM. So we're actually going to use this map button here too to correct some of this, because we do want to be able to turn it all the way off, but you'll hear as we turn it all the way up it gets a little messy. I don't really consider that usable, so what we're going to do is we're going to mess with this now until we find the very edge of what we would want to use, and then we'll use this map tool to correct for that. I think that's probably the farthest I go, so we'll go hit map, and that's -10. So if we go to FM amount, which is the knob we're trying to affect here, and we go over to max, we're going to set that to -10. Hit enter. And now our knob goes from the minimum of -infinity to the maximum of -10. And then if we just hit this map button again, now our knob goes to -10. Cool. The next thing I'm going to add in is the course. So we'll go ahead and right click that, map to macro 3. We're going to rename it FM course. And this one we're definitely going to want to limit the knob. So you can hear what it sounds like at 0.125. And it sounds like garbage. So we're definitely going to map this. For me, 1 is probably the last usable one, and maybe like 9 for the top of it. And if we want more, we can always add it in later. But yeah, so I'll go through these and you can hear them. You can hear that gets pretty out of control. The only reason I leave it at 9, I really only use like 1, 2, and 3, sometimes 4. But if you put it up to 9 and you crank it down really fast, it sounds cool. So you can kind of play around with that with automation. That's the only reason I leave that there. So we'll just put it back to 2 for now. And then we're going to map the fine to macro 4. So go ahead and rename that FM fine. And for OCD purposes, we are going to add some spaces. There we go. So that way it's 2 rows. Oh yeah, I forgot to add colors to these. Cool. And this is nifty because it helps you can automate it. First of all, you get cool effects. Kind of sounds like it's talking. It's like the Charlie Brown teacher. And you can also use it as a quick way to fine-tune the tuner. And Then we're going to add, what was the next thing I added? I'm going to cheat. I'm going to pull up the one I made so I can look at vibrato. That's right. We haven't even got to that tab yet. So we're going to go to modulation, and we're going to use this LFO here, this first LFO. Everything in this tab is just useful to control other parameters in the instrument. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this LFO to control the pitch. So if we just click on LFO, it'll turn it on, and we're going to grab the pitch and crank it all the way up so we can hear what we're doing. So right now it sounds like this. You can't really hear it because the frequency's down. We're going to turn this frequency up. What am I missing here? I'm not really sure. Oh, I was playing the wrong instrument. All right. Okay, so there we go. I was gonna say, it should be a pretty extreme effect. So yeah, if we go to LFO, we'll turn this frequency down till we get to a rate we like, and then we can grab the attack and put it up. I usually like to set this somewhere around the attack of the or around the same time as the decay on this global setting. So we'll try that. Even a little bit more, really. I'm not trying to get like the impact. I want the vibrato to come on after, so it's just like a tail end of it is wiggly. It's just a subtle effect. You can make this more extreme if you want, but I'm going to leave it like that. So we'll map this pitch percentage to macro 5. We'll just call it vibrato. Alright. Give that a nice color. And then the last thing I mapped was the decay. I believe I mapped this to volume and the volume envelope. Okay, cool. So this one's a little trickier. This is a good example of mapping two things to macro at once. We want our limiter here. We want to be able to watch this. Actually, we just want to be able to watch spectrum. So we're going to map the decay to the macro. And we're definitely going to want to change what that does, because right now it's like a blip to just forever sustaining, which we don't really need all those options. So we'll go to decay here, go to minimum, and we'll just turn this up. Make sure you have this knob all the way down when you're doing this, the one down here. Otherwise, you're not listening to what you're doing properly. So you have it set at minimum, so you'll hear exactly where you put this. And I try to make sure that my minimum is greater than my release. That way, if you just like hit the key staccato, it doesn't ring out longer than it does if you hold it. And then we'll turn the decay to max. That's probably all I'd ever use it for. That's a pretty nice range there. So we'll just go ahead and give that a color. Oh god. Oh god. Alright. That'll I go pretty ham with the colors. That's pretty. Alright. And then we'll just do we gotta rename these macros we're not using. Just put a space in there as a placeholder so it gets rid of the text. Makes it look more clean in my opinion. Oh, I almost forgot. So now that we've got the decay set to this macro, if you look at the volume over here of the sub, it's way quieter than its max, and you can see the max is going over -6 decibels now. So what we're going to do is we're going to map this volume to the decay as well. Hey, don't rename my macro. And that's going to be really bad, so we're going to go to map, because right now it's basically going to be silent all the way to way too loud. So we're going to find our decay knob here and go to the one that says volume. And then we're going to set this probably to 0 for the minimum. And then for the maximum, we'll probably set it to like -6. Actually, we're going to do -4. Yeah, so you can see that tames it and keeps it kind of all in the same range there. Cool. Close that map tab. And now I'm going to open my tuner. And then if we click this highlighted tab right here, it's going to close everything and collapse it. So now you get this pretty little rack here with all these pretty colors, and you can play around with that stuff. You can automate these. So if you're in here and you have written something, you can if you click on this knob, you have to have the automation settings open up here. Now you'll see that cutoff is listed here, and you can start playing with the cutoff. Oops. And the FM amount. I don't know. Yeah, you could play around with it more. You can get some crazy stuff going. So yeah, play around with those settings, automate them, just have fun with it, and just make sure every once in a while to open this tab and check your tuner and make sure you're still in tune. It happens to me a lot where the FM will get out of control. It doesn't really matter as long as it sounds good, but if it doesn't sound good and you're trying to figure out why, that's the first place I check. So make sure that it's still in tune. Hey, so I was watching this back, editing, and I realized I missed a step. It's pretty important too. So if you're writing in notes, mini notes, and you follow all the steps that I just told you, and you press the C note, you will notice that you are hearing an F. So the way we're going to correct for this, normally I would go into the sample tab and change the root but for some reason that really messes with the FM. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to go to MIDI effects. We're going to go to pitch, drag that before the sampler, and we just put in -5 for the pitch. You can collapse this, and now you'll see that now when you play a C, you're getting a C, and so an F is an F now. Cool. Alright guys, thanks for watching guys. Hope you enjoyed that video. Hope you learned something. I probably will continue making these, so if you enjoyed it, go ahead and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and let me know down below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Peace.